Hello. Have you ever wondered how much we really know about the people we pass on the street every day? Could a deep and dangerous secret be hiding behind a calm exterior? Today's story will make you look at the abyss that can open up in the depths of an ordinary person's soul in a new way. Of course, if money is not a panacea, it at least allows you to solve many problems. But it is unlikely to make bad people better. The main character of our story was wealthy, but at the same time a very unkind person, and unfortunately, this only played into his hands. The small town of Brentwood is located about a 20-minute drive from Nashville. This town is famous for its picturesque scenery. It made it into the top 20 richest and most prestigious places in the United States. The town has a population of about 40,000. It is considered one of the safest. Since its founding in 1969, there have only been 8 murders here. In fact, Brentwood is ranked as one of the least criminal cities in the country. It has wonderful parks and numerous restaurants and clubs for a wealthy clientele. In addition, many offices of various large manufacturing companies, including international ones, are based here. Despite such positive characteristics, even in such heavenly places, real nightmares happen. The estate of Rachel and Randolph Maidens was located in a gated country club on a hill with 600 acres of land. This award-winning private golf club is known as the #1 Governor's Club. It belonged to the richest and most prestigious areas of the city, and their mansion had an area of 5,000 square meters and cost a fortune. It seemed like a truly impregnable fortress, ideal for raising a family and doing business. 34-year-old Rachel Maidens worked as a private orthodontist with her own practice in the city's business district. She was a very beautiful blonde and a devoted mother to her only daughter Natalie. Rachel was educated at a private Catholic school in Nashville, then at a college in South Birmingham. After that, she entered the dental faculty of the University of Florida. Throughout her studies, Rachel has repeatedly received various honors. This successful beauty demonstrated brilliant academic results. One of her achievements was a prestigious scholarship. The final court of her academic career was a residency at the National Children's Medical Center in Washington, D.C. Despite her relatively young age, Rachel was rapidly reaching professional heights. Thanks to hard work, she managed to open her own practice, publish articles in professional journals, and regularly speak at conferences. But not everything in her life was so cloudless. Back when she was in college, on December 3, 2003, her father Richard was arrested for trafficking oxycodone. He was a respected pharmacist but was exposed for illegally selling prescription drugs. Although his case had only just begun to be investigated by law enforcement, Richard was so afraid of losing his reputation that he decided to voluntarily take his own life just 2 days after his arrest. The family's horrors did not end there, as the police continued their investigation into other family members. The bank accounts of Rachel, her mother and brother were frozen. The investigation lasted for years. Rachel's mother was forced to pay a $15,000 fine. This is where the dark streak for the main character of the story ended. However, many close friends and relatives claimed that all this dealt a severe blow to her emotional state. However, this did not stop the heroine on her way to professional heights. Anastasia, probably an error in the name, translator's note, survived these difficulties and continued to develop her own business. She still strived to be the best in her profession, to wealth and independence. The girl was able to cope with the financial crisis and the painful loss of a loved one. And then recover. Rachel regained control of her life. Her husband Randolph came from Georgia, graduating from high school and a technical college there. Over time, he took a position as a sales manager for pharmaceuticals with a decent salary. But by the time of the tragic events, all this had collapsed, and Randolph was left without a job. Just 3 months before the events described, striking changes were noticed in his behavior that created many problems. Rachel reported that her husband had very rapidly slipped into alcoholism. In addition, she suspected that he was simultaneously using various which only exacerbated the detrimental effect. During this period, several witnesses noticed how he visited a restaurant in a state of severe intoxication, harassed visitors and employees, so one of the waitresses was forced to call 911. The woman who called the rescue service recognized this man as Randolph Maidens, since he had dined here with his wife more than once. A few minutes after the first call, she called the rescue service again because she became even more worried. According to her, some suspicious things accidentally spilled out of the visitor's pocket, among which were shotgun shells, as well as a large bottle that looked like Tylenol painkillers. The troublemaker picked it all up and tried to leave, but the waitress persuaded him to stay, and the patrolman who arrived at the scene immediately noticed the man's inadequate condition. However, they could not determine exactly whether he was drunk or under the influence of something more serious. Randolph got nervous and wanted to leave, saying that his wife had called him and demanded that he return home immediately. Then the girl offered to contact his wife, but he refused to give her phone number. The man tried to get into his car, but the police did not allow it. When searching the car, a rifle was found in the back seat. Despite all the oddities, Randolph was not arrested. Several eyewitnesses saw someone pick him up in a car that evening, not allowing him to get behind the wheel while intoxicated. When Randolph got into such trouble, he always asked not to call his wife. The man complained that he often became a victim of her anger and was afraid to infuriate her. However, given his inappropriate behavior, such a reaction from her seemed quite logical. On the evening of April 21, 2013, Rachel's mother Betty called the Brentwood Police Department and asked law enforcement to visit her daughter's mansion. The woman immediately reported that Randolph was on the verge of suicide. She was worried because she couldn't get through to Rachel. Betty had been trying to contact her daughter for a long time, but her husband kept answering the phone. He refused to hand the phone over to his wife. Eventually the woman couldn't stand it and threatened to call the police, but that didn't help and she had to keep her word. The officers rushed to the call in a matter of minutes. It immediately caught the eye that the curtains were drawn in the whole house. It was not possible to look inside, because no one answered the knock on the door. By chance, the garage door was unlocked. The police were able to get inside and continued to call the residents by name. Neither Randolph nor Rachel were found in the house. Suddenly, a child responded to their call. 2-year-old Natalie was upstairs and crying. She refused to say what had happened to her. Through tears, the child repeated the same phrase over and over again. "Daddy's gone, Daddy's gone." While examining the second floor, one of the officers went out to the spacious hall, leaned over the balcony railing and saw a blood-splattered wall and a shotgun lying on the couch on the first floor. Rachel was found in the hallway between the living room and the vestibule leading to the master bedroom. She was lifeless, shot like a target at a shooting range. The woman was hit by 8 bullets from a 9mm pistol, as well as 2 shotgun blasts to the back. The victim was wrapped in a blanket, and upon examination it became obvious that someone had tried to wipe the blood from the walls and floor, leaving ominous smears. Naturally, Randolph Maidens was immediately declared wanted for the murder of Rachel. To prevent the suspect from escaping, helicopters were involved. The elite area resembled scenes from a Hollywood blockbuster. Law enforcement officials actively worked with the victim's neighbors, trying to find out where the man could have gone. The victim's mother was informed about the terrible event, so she immediately came to pick up her granddaughter. Her son-in-law was considered extremely dangerous due to his recent inadequate behavior. Most likely, he remained armed, so an appropriate warning was issued. The family's neighbors confirmed that they had repeatedly seen the fugitive in an inadequate state. A note was found on the kitchen table in the mansion of the deceased. In it, Randolph apologized profusely to his daughter, confessing that he loved her very much. He wrote that because of his terrible crime, he was forced to flee, but did not specify what he had done. The man expressed gratitude to all of his wife's relatives for the years spent with them. He confessed that he could no longer endure the daily humiliation he suffered from his wife. Randolph described how from the very beginning of their relationship, every evening she subjected him to a moral execution, trampling on his dignity. After 6 years, his patience ran out. According to him, on that fatal evening, his wife again began to pick on him, and this overflowed the cup. The loving father wanted to take care of his daughter Natalie, several times apologizing to the girl for not restraining himself and snapping. He also stressed that he did not want the child to stay with his mother, so he asked to transfer custody to Rachel's relatives. By the time the experts became acquainted with the contents of the message, the main suspect was still at large. According to some experts, his letter could be interpreted not only as a confession, but also as a suicide note. This complicated the search activities, because it was assumed that the man could have already committed suicide. Interestingly, the man's car remained in the driveway of the mansion. $87,000 in cash was found in it, stacked in a large bag in the trunk. Another about $10,000 in cash was found in the house. After checking the phone calls, the officers found out that on the evening of the day of the murder, Randolph called his lawyer. Apparently, the man's initial plan was to kill his wife and then escape with the money and start a new life. But then something went wrong, and he wrote a note. Maybe it was just an attempt to cover his tracks. But then why didn't he take his car? What could have prevented him? Because there was more than enough time. Law enforcement officials suggested that this could be related to Betty's calls. The woman called the police, which could have ruined all the criminal's plans. To the surprise of the police, the search did not take long. 12 hours after the start of the hunt for the killer, Randolph simply walked out of the woods located behind his house with his hands raised. The man surrendered to the authorities without resistance. He immediately blamed his wife for the fact that Rachel had morally tyrannized him for years. Especially strong pressure began when he lost his job. Because of such behavior of his beloved woman, he practically sank to a marginal way of life. In his defense, he claimed that he was Rachel's third husband, because others also could not stand the constant nagging. However, this could in no way serve as a justification for 10 cowardly shots in the back of his wife. The criminal had barely managed to settle the consequences of his antics in a restaurant 3 months ago. Now he was charged with the murder of his wife. It became known that he had repeatedly had problems with the law recently due to minor offenses. In particular, he was detained in his car while intoxicated a few months before his wife's death. The policeman was sure that Randolph was drunk due to the sharp smell of alcohol. But the man refused to take the test. According to the law, this was equated to driving while intoxicated. Previously, he got into an accident in his car for the same reason. He was so drunk that he crashed into a transformer substation and left almost 200 houses without power for several hours. A few weeks before the murder of Rachel, a neighbor noticed how a man in a ski mask was running through the forest with 2 dogs. The neighbor was walking along the same planting from which Randolph appeared when he surrendered to the authorities. She approached the stranger and recognized Randolph. The woman started talking to him to find out what the matter was. She immediately realized that the man was heavily drunk or under the influence of some substances. The inadequate neighbor explained that he was walking the dogs and got lost, so he wandered towards her sight. In the woman's opinion, this time his backpack contained something like a bow and arrows, so she hurried to leave. Later, he was seen more than once doing similar things, which caused concern. People in the houses closest to the Maidens' family residence feared for their safety. At the end of March, a case of illegal entry was initiated against Randolph in Florida, but he managed to escape punishment. The investigation was simply hushed up, probably his money bailed him out. The most dramatic incident occurred at the beginning of 2013 during a business conference in Orlando, where Randolph came with his wife. One evening he came to the bar and got so drunk that he could barely string a few words together. The staff of the establishment asked him to leave, but instead he began to smash dishes and swear loudly. Some of the visitors heard him threatening his wife with violence at that moment, but no one took the drunken mumbling seriously. Several people tried to intervene and take the brawler out of the bar, but he began to throw punches at them. The police had to be called again. In the end, he was arrested for hooliganism and drinking alcohol in a public place, but was released the next day. The management of the pharmaceutical company where Randolph worked found out about this incident. They took their reputation very seriously there, so the employee's behavior was taken extremely seriously. One colleague, who wished to remain anonymous, advised the man to take a leave of absence for health reasons, but he did not listen and was already at work 3 days later. Eventually he was fired. During the investigation, the police talked a lot with the killer's employees, but everything took place in conditions of strict secrecy. The organization's management threatened to fire anyone who publicly commented on the incidents related to their employee alcoholic. According to these people, the criminal's behavior changed dramatically a few months before the attack on his wife. He himself did not explain the reasons, but constantly complained about Rachel and blamed her for everything. Although no one from the environment believed that his wife could bring him to such a state. She always seemed like a sweet, calm and judicious woman. And even if she did quarrel with him at home, this is no reason to behave inadequately in public places, endangering outsiders. It turned out that at about the time Randolph dealt with his wife, his ex-girlfriend Larissa Farley was trying to contact him. They hadn't seen each other since school, but then their relationship didn't work out. Larissa got married, divorced, and now remembered Randolph, deciding to try again. She knew about his family problems and hoped that everything would end in divorce. In fact, the woman was shocked by the latest events in Randolph's life and believed that she could help him return to a normal existence. Larissa had known him for over 10 years, they had been friends for a long time. According to her, there was not a single episode in Randolph's biography that could indicate the possibility of a brutal massacre. She always perceived him as a mature and intelligent man who values his family and loves his child. At the same time, Larissa knew about the other side of his personality. Randolph lived for a long time with an alcoholic father who treated him badly. In adulthood, he had a tense relationship with his mother. Perhaps that is why he did not want to give his daughter Natalie to be raised by members of his family. Larissa suggested that problems with his wife and a difficult childhood broke the man and he needed help. Employees of the company from which the killer was fired claimed that they knew about his problems with. According to colleagues and even management, long before the tragedy, he himself admitted that he was struggling with addiction. It was believed that in recent years before the attack, he coped with these difficulties and their consequences. But then there was a breakdown, which led to inadequate behavior and the murder of his wife. What really caused such an act? Immediately after his arrest, 42-year-old Randolph was charged with intentional murder. In addition, he endangered the life of a child. This became the second point of the accusation. The man was also found guilty of falsifying evidence, as he tried to wipe away traces of blood and hide the bloody sheet in which Rachel's body was wrapped. Investigators were convinced that he was going to get rid of traces of the crime, and then escape, probably to Mexico, with money prepared in advance. Initially, bail was set at $2.5 million. Randolph was behind bars awaiting trial. By the end of June 2013, he still had not pleaded guilty on any of the charges. His lawyer was one of Nashville's best criminal defense attorneys, David Rabin. He sought to reduce the amount of bail and release the defendant under house arrest, believing that he was actually a victim of tyranny by his wife. The lawyer insisted, despite the fact that a large amount of cash was found in Randolph's car, there were no documents, cards or other evidence that the criminal was going to leave the city. The defender claimed that his client had enough time to escape, but he did not. The prosecutor's office held a different opinion for a long time. There was even a witness who claimed to have heard about plans to escape to Mexico. But later, this testimony was found to be false. The mother of the deceased filed a civil lawsuit against her son-in-law in order to prevent him from using the property, accounts and finances jointly acquired with his wife. She feared that Randolph would again escape justice by bribing everyone he could at the expense of family wealth. The woman was sure that this was the only way the criminal had avoided punishment for his misdeeds so far. Rachel's mother hoped that he simply would not have the opportunity to cover the legal costs and thus he would receive the deserved punishment for the crime committed. But despite everything, time was on the side of the detainee. The lawyer managed to achieve a significant reduction in the amount of bail, down to $750,000. Randolph immediately posted bail, as his mother-in-law's lawsuit was still pending. This meant that he would be free for at least another year and a half, awaiting a court hearing scheduled for September 2014. Amazingly, the judge even allowed Randolph to continue living in the house where Rachel's murder took place. However, despite this, the man had many difficulties, because the bail conditions continued to apply. He could not enter the house without notifying the Brentwood police 24 hours in advance. During this period, a lawyer had to be with him constantly, and a GPS tracker in the form of a bracelet was attached to Randolph's leg. He was forbidden to communicate with his daughter and the family members of his murdered wife. Meanwhile, his mother-in-law did not stop the fight, awaiting a decision on her civil suit. In the end, she managed to get a court ban on the couple's property. But Randolph just came home and took his clothes and personal belongings. This became known, so the man was accused of contempt of court. However, thanks to the efforts of the defender, this charge was dropped. Such audacity seemed unthinkable, but later it became obvious that the criminal got away with a lot because of his connections in the governor's club and local law enforcement agencies. Investigators found out that after the murder, Randolph did not just run into the forest. Several neighbors said that in the morning they found traces of attempts to break into their homes through garage and regular doors. The police checked the recordings from the club's surveillance cameras and realized that it was Randolph who was trying to get to the neighbors. For what specific purposes the inadequate man wanted to do this remained unclear. He posed a serious threat. Randolph himself denied these facts. Gradually everything was hushed up. The judge's decision, which allowed a dangerous criminal who had lost control of himself to remain at large for a year and a half, was criticized for a long time and was subject to reasonable doubts. Randolph became a true example of how destructive impunity can be. In fact, he couldn't even stay free for the entire period he received thanks to his skilled lawyer to await trial. Just 8 months later, in December 2013, he was caught trying to break into a residential complex in another Nashville suburb, Bellevue. It was a rather strange case, which was reported by one of the residents of an apartment building. According to him, Randolph tried to get inside, knocked on the doors, pretending to be a policeman. The man suspected something was wrong when he did not open the door to the uninvited guest, but heard him start doing the same with other apartments, so he called the cops. When they arrived, they again found the hero of this story pretty drunk. The very next day, the judge decided to revoke his right to bail. Strangely, his inadequate drunken antics continued both before and after the murder of his wife. It's hard to imagine the fear Randolph's neighbors lived in during the last year. Especially when they found out that he was out on bail and would be living next to them in the family mansion. It seemed that the killer would soon get what he deserved, because under the laws of the state of Tennessee, his crime was punishable by death. However, the experienced defender had an excellent plan. Unexpectedly for the victim's relatives, on September 29, 2014, Randolph made a deal with the prosecution, pleading guilty to second-degree murder and contemptuous treatment of a child. As a result, he was sentenced to only 25 years in prison. Interestingly, this is not even half of the maximum sentence for these crimes. Randolph could have gotten 60 years behind bars. Moreover, the lawyer managed to preserve the killer's right to parole for exemplary behavior. Given the age of the defendant at the time of sentencing, 42 years old, he will be able to be released at about 60. During the sentencing, Randolph said, "Rachel, I promised to love you or let you go, and I betrayed it all. I will live with this pain forever. No prison is worse than the one I brought upon myself. To all of Rachel's family and friends, I am truly sorry for all the pain and for all the moments that I have caused you." Rachel's mother took such a court decision as a personal insult. She repeatedly appealed to higher authorities, seeking a review and toughening of the sentence, but all was in vain. Randolph himself commented on his mild punishment as an opportunity to save the life of at least one of Natalie's parents. Of course, Rachel's family was shocked by such decisions that were made throughout the investigation and trials. The mother and brother appealed to the public through the media, expressing dissatisfaction and emphasizing their grief over the brutal and tragic death of a beautiful successful woman. Notes of protest were heard, attention was focused on the absurd decisions of the judicial system, which sided with the criminal. He was never charged with contempt of court, falsification of evidence, as well as for previous offenses, such as drunk driving. Randolph's lawyer responded to these statements by conveying his client's sincere apologies and condolences to the victim's family. However, Betty heard in them only template phrases that could in no way justify the killer, comfort her, or return Rachel. Natalie went into Betty's care. The girl will receive all parental property after reaching the age of majority. The victim's mother is still convinced that the only reason for such a lenient sentence for her son-in-law is connections and money. Please write your thoughts and reactions in the comments below. For those who are new here, subscribing is the best way to stay updated on future content. Also give a like please. Take care of yourself and your loved ones. Thank you for your support during this difficult time. Until next time, friends.